you for the past, 8 hours. Um, okay, I am going to very rapidly, not without kavanah, but very rapidly go through mincha because I'm excited to get to our teaching today. And we only have 45 minutes. So I want to make sure that we daven, but I also want to make sure that we have enough time to do a little bit of learning together. So if you are in the Lev Shalem, we are on page 214. If you're in the Sim Shalom, or the Slim Shalom, I should say, we're on page 226. And if you're in the full volume Sim Shalom, we're on page 558. And I see that our most recent rabbinic intern just joined us. So hello, Rachel. Really nice to have you here. Hello. אשרי יושבי ביתך, עוד ילוך סלע, שם שכחו, שם שלהם אהבתי להם. פותח את ידיך, מסביר לך אחרי צהן, צריך לך. תהילת אדוני ידבר פיו, יברכו בצר שם קודשו לעולם ועד, ואנחנו נברכיה מעתה ועד עולם, הללויה, ובא ציון. ואתה קדוש יושב תהילות ישראל, וקרא זה אל זה ואמר, קדוש קדוש קדוש, אדוני צבאות, מלך לארץ כבודו, מקבלים תן רמי קדיש בשמו. ותישאני רוח, ושמע אחרי קורש גדול, ברוך כבר אדוני במקומות, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, עמך תקן. יברכך ברך ברוך אלוהינו שבאנו לכבודו והבדיל מאתיים ונתנו ויפתח ליבנו בתורתו ויעשה ליבנו בתורתו. ויבטחו בך יודעי שמך, כי לא עזבת דורשך אדוני, אדוני חפץ למען צדקו, יגדיל תורה וידיר. ואני תפילתי לך אדוני את רצון, אלוהים ברוב חסדך, ענני באמת אישך. So as we've been doing for the past few, hold on one second. For the past few weeks, I will be saying the blessing la'asok b'divrei Torah, and then we will be reading together. I'll read for you, but you can follow along the aliyot that would be said in a mincha mariv service. So this week it happens to be Devarim, Deuteronomy, chapter 1, verse 1 through 10. And I'm just going to read them straight through since we don't have a Misha Berach or anything like that. So if you're in a regular Chumash, that's just Deuteronomy 1:1. If you are in the Eitz Chaim, we are on page 981. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Eile hadvarim asher diber Moshe el kol Yisrael be'ever hayarden bamidbar barava Mosuf ben Paran uven Tofel v'lavan v'chatzerot v'di zahav achar asar yom mechorev derech har seir ad kadesh barnea ויהי ב40 שנה באשתי 10 חודש באחד לחודש דיבר משה בני ישראל ככל אשר ציווה אדוני אותו עליהם אחרי הכותו את סיחון מלך האמורי אשר יושב בחשבון ואת אוג מלך הבשן אשר יושב באשתורות באדרעי בעבר הירדן בארץ מואב הויל משה באר את התורה הזאת לאמור אדוני אלוהינו דיבר עלינו בחורב לאמור רב לכם שבט בהר הזה פנו וסעו לכם ובו הר אמורי ואת כל שכניו בערבה וההר. ובשפלה בנגב וחוף הים, ארץ הכנעני והלבנון, עד הנהר הגדול, נהר פרת. ראה, נתתי לפניכם את הארץ, באו רשו את הארץ. אשר נשבע אדוני לאבותיכם לאברהם ליצחק ליעקב לתת להם ולזרעם אחריהם, ואמר עליכם בעת ההיא לאמור, לא אוכל לבדי שאת אתכם, אדוני אלוהיכם ירבה אתכם, והניחם היום ככוכבי השמיים לרוב. You want me to do another verse, Larry? I'm going to do one more verse for Larry, even though I have written down that it's only till verse 10. But Larry knows. Adonai Elohei avotechem Yosef alechem kachem elef פעמים, ויברך אתכם כאשר דיבר לכם. One for good luck, as we say. For those of you who were not with us this morning, that seems like such a small amount of Torah. This morning we read like 300 plus verses of Torah. It was insane. It was an hour and a half of Torah, read beautifully, of course, but that right now felt very quick in comparison to this morning. We are now going to do the Mincha Amidah silently. You aren't going to be able to see me, but because it's silent, that won't really matter. We're on page 223 in the Lev Shalom, page 234 in the Slim Shalom, and page 574 in the full volume Sim Shalom. If you have not yet finished your Amidah, please continue at your own pace. We'll continue now on the next page in your Siddur after the Amidah, right before Kaddish Shalem. I'm sorry that I don't have an exact page, though in my Siddur, in the Lev Shalem, it's on page 230. צדקתך צדק לעולם, ותורתך אמת, ותאכל עמד מרום אשר עשית גדולות, אלוהים מי כמוך, צדקתך כאריה, משפטך תהום רבה, אדום ומה תושיע אדוני. Aleinu, page 231, page 248, or page 598. Aleinu לשבח לאדון הכל, ברוך הוא קוראים ומשתחווים ומועדים לפני מלך החיים. ככתוב בתורתך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד. Vered and Dove, would you like to lead us in Mourner's Kaddish?
Sure.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Okay. Wait. Here we go. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה,
Amen.
בעלמא דברה חירותי, וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון, ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב, ואמרו אמן.
Amen.
יהא שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ולעלמי עלמיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו
Bריחו.
לעילה מכל ברכתה ושירתה תוש בחטא ונחמתה דאמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן.
Amen.
יהא שלמה רבה משמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן.
Amen.
עושה שלום למרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן.
Amen. For those of you who are comfortable doing so, if you are there and able to turn on your camera, we're going to do a little teaching, and I would love to have as much participation as you would like to have, but it's also just really nice to see your faces. And those of you who are on YouTube, I hope that it's nice to see my face, and I wish I was seeing your faces. But one of the reasons that we wanted to bring this service to Zoom is because, as most of you know, when we do Seudah Shlishit in person at Temple Beth Am, we have a very interactive learning session, and we wanted to be able to call on people if they have questions or comments. So Kenji is monitoring the Zoom for us, and if you have a question, just raise your hand, and either I will say your name or Kenji will see you and he will unmute you. And I would love to have any questions or participation throughout this whole teaching. So those of you who printed it out and have it in front of you, wonderful. If not, we are going to be looking at Deuteronomy chapter 1, verses 27 through 33. And any of the commentaries that I mention, I'll actually read out loud. So if you don't have the sheet in front of you, you'll still be able to follow along. So one of my favorite parts of being a rabbi is working with conversion students. And one of the things that I ask every conversion student to do is to write about their theology, to somehow express to me what their theology is, what their belief in God, what their relationship to God is. And it's a way for the Beit Din, for the three people who are going to be asking them questions about their Judaism before they go to mikvah, to know a little bit deeper about that question rather than just saying, what's your relationship to God in their Beit Din, which is a really big question for any of us to be able to answer. So to be able to have them write about that answer first and then have the Beit Din ask them questions about their answer allows the conversation to be a bit deeper the moment that they start to have the conversation. So I was working with one of these conversion students earlier this week, and she said to me, I really don't know what I believe in God. I know that I believe in moments that God has somehow had something to do with the feeling that I've had, or the miracle that I've experienced, or the reaction that has been had by the people around me if they saw a comet in the sky, or someone or some animal being born. Those aspects she could speak to being godly, but she couldn't yet articulate her belief in God. And I said to her, that's exactly why I asked you to write this essay, because it changes. It changes for all of us. It changes with interactions that we have. It changes with moments that we have in our life, with experiences that we go through. I know for those of us who have lost people dear to us on this call, that for you, God has changed drastically. I will speak for myself. God has changed drastically for me based on the deaths that I have had close to me in my life. And that's okay, because Judaism is never asking us to say, from the moment you come out of the womb, you believe in God a certain way, and the moment that you die, you still believe in God that way. In fact, one of my favorite people who speaks about this process of being in relationship with God is Rabbi Brad Artson, who actually calls this level of theology process theology, that you actually, in your changing, your relationship to God changes. It's a process. So that is going to take us into this conversation here in Deuteronomy. There is a line in the few verses that we're going to read together that is going to, I think, at least for me, it stood out in a very profound way when having this conversation about belief in God and where that might stem from. So again, we're in Deuteronomy chapter 1, verses 27 through 33. And we're in the middle of the retelling of a story, which I'm going to ask you to tell me which story we are retelling. Deuteronomy is a book of the Torah that does this for most of its writing. Most of its writing is a recap of things that have already happened, sometimes with a few different facts, which is what makes people who are writing the documentary hypothesis theory to believe that Deuteronomy was actually written by a completely different writer at a different time, because there are so many recapitulations with little things here and there that aren't necessarily as we remember them from the other books of our Torah. Okay. You sulked in your tents and said, quote, "It is because Adonai hates us that Adonai brought us out of the land of Egypt to hand us over to the Amorites to wipe us out. What kind of place are we going to? Our kinsmen have taken the heart out of us, saying, we saw there a people stronger and taller than we, large cities with walls sky high, and even, it says Anakim, which in English it says here Anakites. So what story, someone just raise your hand and Kenji will unmute you. What story are we recapping here?
It sounds like this is the story of the spies when they're going to be scouting out the land.
Great, exactly. So this is the story of the spies. This is again, there are little moments here that are not exactly the way that we remember them, but we're retelling the story in a general way. This recap continues. I said to you, have no dread or fear of them. None other than Adonai your God, who goes before you, will fight for you, just as Adonai did for you in Egypt before your very eyes. And in the wilderness where you saw how Adonai your God carried you, as a man carries his son, all the way that you traveled until you came to this place, yet for all that, you have no faith in Adonai your God, who goes before you on your journeys to scout the place where you are to encamp, in fire by night and in cloud by day, in order to guide you on the route you are to follow. So this line here, Uvedavar hazeh, einchem ma'aminim ba'Adonai Elohechem. And with this thing, which is what the commentators are going to talk about in a moment, you seem to have no faith in me. You have no emunah. What are we hearing here in God saying that? What is the tone behind God wanting to say that phrase? Yet for all of that, all of these things that I just told you, you still have no faith in me, Adonai your God. Any thoughts? Yeah, Vered.
Disappointment, I would say.
Great. Disappointment, right? God is wondering, how could I have done all these things for you? And you still don't seem to believe in what I'm capable of. Other thoughts?
We're hard to please.
Right. We are hard people to please. And we know that from the stories that we just read before we got into Devarim, right? We're constantly complaining, right? We never are okay with what's going on for us. There's always more that we could be asked for. Yeah, Gary or Marlise? Wait, Gary, you have to unmute. You're talking, but you have to unmute.
Okay.
There you
Okay.
go.
There's more. Instead of I don't think it was disappointment. It was more frustration. It's leading
Okay.
more of an anger.
Okay, great. So God could be frustrated or angry or unsure how this could possibly be, right? I am so disappointed in you. I've done all of these things, and yet, really, still, I'm so frustrated that you can't actually believe in me. Great.
Yeah,
Other,
this has always been one of the big things. Bnei Israel experienced the plagues in Egypt. They experienced redemption at the parting of the Red Sea. They experienced manna with heaven. All of these experiences, and yet they come back and they still say they don't accept, and they can't. Why did God do this to us? It's like, if those people have had those direct experiences with God, if our ancestors there had those, then kal v'chomer, how can it be for us? How can it be for us to be able, who don't get that experience, have that direct connection with God, to be able to accept the God of the Bible?
great. Yeah, Larry.
I have a slightly different read on all this. So this is Moses speaking, and basically he's not saying that people don't believe in God. There's no question here of people believing in God. This is a question of the people not trusting God. So this is a very different issue than if one actually believes or doesn't believe in God. They take God as a given, but they don't trust him. And that's the issue here.
Great. Yeah, Diane.
So in extension of that, even Moshe and Aaron didn't firmly trust in God in the incident at the rock, where God said, tap the rock, and they hit the rock.
Speak to the
Great.
Speak to the rock, right?
Right. Right. Yes. No, that you're exactly right. And you're bringing up an extremely good point, that when we talk about belief in God, those of you who heard I don't remember which sermon it was, but a high holiday sermon this past year, which was all about belief in God, I actually translated this idea of belief in God as one that's very hard to understand, because as Larry's pointing out, it's actually not belief at all. They understand that God is doing all of this for them, and yet they're still complaining. It's that they don't trust that God is making the right decisions, the decisions with them in mind. And then, as Diane's pointing out, there's this idea here that even their leaders might not have trusted that which God could either provide for them or do for them. And so the people are then kind of taking their lead, so to speak. Grant, were you going to say something, or was that just a stretch? No. Okay. So I want to look next at some of these commentaries. So if you have the sheet in front of you, it's on the second page. So some of our commentators are going to actually discuss this in the language of belief, right? Of emunah. The other interesting thing to think about is when we say the word amen, we aren't actually saying, I believe in you, right? That's not what amen means. It actually means I hear you, or I am saying with you what you are saying, right? The way that the Kaddish is written out is actually a beautiful way of understanding what amen means, because we, the congregation, chime in with amen before the mourner can even finish their sentence. We want the person to know that we as a community are there to hold them. And so amen, going back to what Larry was saying, amen isn't necessarily belief. It's a the word that's coming to mind is like, it's a globbing onto, right? It's an acknowledgement of moving forward with that which either in the Kaddish you want to be able to support the person in, or in this case, what God is able to do for the people. So Rashi says here that this idea uvedavar hazeh, right, which is very vague. We don't know what uvedavar hazeh is, because it just means and with this thing, which is really the most vague you could ever be. It says, Rashi says that God promised you, right? Shehu mavtichachem lehaviacham el haaretz, to bring you into the land. Einchem ma'aminim bo. And so the end of this sentence that says, and we do not, or when God is saying, but now Rashi is putting this in our language, the not belief here is that we're actually going to enter the land. It's taken us so much time. There's been so much complaining. There have been so many moments where you go back and you go forward. Today, if you listen to the Torah reading, there was, we camped here, then we left here, then we camped here, then we left here, then we camped here, then we left here, right? There's a lot of that. And so Rashi seems to believe that what we're talking about here is the actual land, is being able to believe that we're going to enter the land, and the people don't. So it's not necessarily this belief in God, but to Larry's point, it's this trust that they're actually going to get to this place that they were told they were going to arrive at. The Or HaChaim is a much more modern commentator. He lived in the 18th century as opposed to the 11th century. Says on the whole verse, right? So he's not just talking about Uvedavar Hazeh, he's talking about the whole verse. He says, why did Moses have to say Uvedavar Hazeh in this manner? Rashi understood, he's going to recap the commentary we actually just read. Rashi understood Moses' word as a reference to God's promise that the people would enter the land of Canaan. This does not appear acceptable. I believe, the Or HaChaim says, the plain meaning of the verse is that Moshe referred to the miracles God, had demonstrated when God lifted the whole Jewish people out of Egypt, just as a father carries his son. So if you look back at those Deuteronomy lines, it says in the line right before, when you saw how Adonai, your God, carried you as a man carries his son. So this idea, and we're going to read a midrash on this right now, this idea that when think about a child on a parent's shoulders, right? When the child is on the parent's shoulders, they're getting to go somewhere. They have a vision of what they can see, of what they can do, but they don't necessarily know how much effort is going into carrying them there, right? They're on their parents' shoulders. It's really fun, but they don't actually understand all the strength, all the effort, all the direction that the parent has to take to get them to where they're going. And we're using that as a metaphor here for God and the Jewish people. I have to find where I am. Oh, proof that the Israelites were lacking in faith at the time is provided in Exodus 17:7, where it says, if the Lord is in our midst or not. So we're just bringing in a proof text here that brings us back to a moment where the people also were not sure. Is God really around? Do we have God on our side? We're not really so sure here. The Zohar, on that verse, provides us with this well-known parable of a father who carries his son on his shoulders. When the father and son meet someone, the son asks the stranger, have you seen my father? Israel's question in the verse we referred to is compared to the effrontery of the child in the parable by the Zohar. This then is what Moses referred to with the words, in this matter you did not have faith in the Lord your God. Moses added, who is walking before you, in order to underline that in view of the continued miracles performed constantly by God, there was no excuse for this lack of faith. So what do you think about this? Do you agree with the Or HaChaim? Do you think that's a valuable parable to bring in here? Yeah, Rachel.
Well, I'm fine rolling with the parable, but if we were to think about their relationship with God even before they left Egypt, like, I think it's understandable that trust would be difficult to maintain, because it's like, if sure, God carried you out, but was God also responsible for getting you into slavery in the first place? Like, right. They were the people who had seen those miracles, but also endured a lot of potentially traumatic things before that.
Great. So the parable works, as Rachel's pointing out, right? This is how theology is so complicated, because sometimes it works and sometimes it's really challenging. So in this particular case, that parable is beautiful because we can imagine the people being carried on God's proverbial shoulders. But in the moments where the people, Israel, or even think about modern day Jews, are going through challenging times, that's a hard parable to think about, because is God leading us into those spaces, or has that metaphor shifted, right? Where does that metaphor fit? And if we're going to use it for our general theology, it's a difficult theology to plant into every single experience with God. Brant, you had your hand up.
Yeah, the story that the one Rashi's easier to swallow as a practical matter, because isn't this like a 1 week walk? and then everybody wanders around for 40 years, essentially, which only takes a few days of walking. So I'm saying is, I could see that makes more sense to me. The second one is an explanation, but I think that the problem is that God or Moses is running into the buzzsaw of slavery. Slavery creates certain psychological things. You can have a belief in God, but you can't run away from being a slave. Now, not everybody thinks like a slave even after they've left slavery. There's some people who are able to get past that, Moses, Joshua, Caleb, but the overwhelming majority of them can't, as the psychology of being a slave, adjust to the type of following that God demands. And that's one of the issues that I think is why you have this. It's not that they don't believe, it's just that it's too high an expectation to expect people coming out of slavery to behave in a way that shows that they believe in a God who even does miracles. And that's why there's still a few of them that are going to get into the land, but the overwhelming majority of them are not, because you have to start with a generation that's not slaves.
It's really interesting, and it actually plays into that process theology that I was talking about before, that Rabbi Artson writes about, because what you're saying, Brent, is that based on the experience that they've just had, it's very hard to then come to terms and say, of course we're behind God 100%. We trust him, we believe in him, right? That's very hard to do once you've had an experience where it might feel as though you didn't have God on your side, right? We're not going to get into this, but talk about the Holocaust, right? The number one question that people ask about the Holocaust is, where was God? And that's a very, very hard question to answer. And it's for exactly the reason that you just said, that people, based on traumatic experience, then have a different reaction to their relationship with God, their trust in God. It's a really great point. Yeah, Larry.
I'm going to make a point, and I don't mean for it to be facetious. First of all, this is along the lines of what have you done for me lately? The people have, even though this incident is the incident of the spies, they've gone through an awful lot.
Yeah.
And there's a psychological element here, a sociological element of actually continue to trust in this force, to trust God, in whom they already believe,
Yeah.
Despite the hardships. But I don't see it as being belief in or even faith, more along the lines of trust and loyalty, not even the outcome. And this is the part that you're going to laugh at. In the same way that those of us who follow sports and root for a sports team, even one as pathetic as, say, the Detroit Lions, and yet I still have loyalty, I believe in some sense, or have faith in them, even if they should disappoint me. And in that sense, I think Moses is asking asking the people that, where is your loyalty to this God who has, in the terms of the Or Chaim metaphor, carried you?
Yeah.
For the text.
I wouldn't have taken that facetiously at all. I think it's a beautiful way of thinking about this, because though I'm not an avid sports fan, I know that when you are someone who follows, whether it's sports or I mean, even think about people these days, right? There are people for whom you might have thought they were extremely wonderful as actors, sports players, what have you. And then they say something and you're like, oh man, can I watch that movie that they're in? Can I be a fan of their sports team anymore? Right? You have this moment of, what do I do with my loyalty based on how disappointed they've now made me feel? And I think it's actually a very, very powerful way of thinking about our relationship to God, because there are these moments where God is going to disappoint us, because God cannot be the end all be all in every single moment, right? Or else there would be something, well, first of all, boring, but also not realistic about our story. There would not be any way for us to have a story that seemed human and realistic and relationship based, even to a deity, if every time that God was in the picture was perfect. And we like to think of God as the perfect being, but you are right, Larry, that in that trust and in that loyalty, we have to be able to assume that there are going to be moments that we can both be held, but also be disappointed in where that holding, so to speak, takes us. Yeah, Diane.
So there's an, how can I say this? Is about free will.
Yeah.
If God is holding us always, then there is no free will.
Mm-hmm.
Then we're never, if we're never on our own, then we can't exert our will.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. And then we get in this cycle of how can you believe in a God if you also believe in free will, right? And then you get into this whole cycle of wanting to know, well, but I do believe in God, but I also believe in free will. So you're exactly right that this parable, and I think that's similar to what Rachel was pointing at, that this parable works in certain moments where that leading makes sense, but in other moments where free will comes into play or disaster comes into play, we want to not have to say that God was the carrier, right? That God was the parent in that moment, but rather that we had the power to do that, or there was some other, leading force in our story that took us there. Alan, you're going to get the last word before I share this last commentary. You have to unmute yourself. There you go.
Okay. The whole thing about free will reminds me of one of the first lines of Pirkei Avot I learned from Aki about, it's got to be about 50 years ago now, because Hakol Tzafui v'hareshut nituna, that everything is known by God, but yet free will is given to us, and it's a paradox, and Heschel calls it a problem of polarity, and that issue of opposites there is all the way through, that carries on, that keva and kavanah, about supposed to daven. Even you said today about wanting to daven and do it with you're going to do it quickly, but you're going to do it with kavanah, and it's that tension that always exists and that permeates what we're going to do. And I think it's part of this tension that Bnei Israel is experiencing with their own experiences as slaves, and what they're doing as now is trying to be free, and how to rectify and reconcile the two.
It's what we're about to read is from a modern day, though he died in 1980, modern day philosopher and sociologist, and I mean the list goes on and on and on about all the things that he's done. Erich Fromm. And Erich, maybe, I don't actually know how he's pronounced his name, but I'm going to say Eric. And he had these different interpretations of how God changed over time in our relationship with God. And I'm going to read it very quickly, but I want you to be able to see that I actually think, based on the verses that we read in Deuteronomy, that this idea is bringing this all together in a very interesting way, that there are different elements of God that we clearly have connections to throughout our Torah. And this Deuteronomy passage here is what kind of seals in the deal, so to speak, at the end of his different tiered connections with God. At the beginning of the Bible, God is an absolute ruler who can and does destroy the world when God is not happy with it. In the next stage, God relinquishes God's absolute power by making a covenant with humankind. God's power is limited because it is subject to the terms of the covenant. The third stage of God's evolution comes in God's revelation to Moses, in which God presents God's self as a nameless God. The evolution of God does not stop with the Bible. Ironically, Maimonides takes it even further by positing that nothing can be said about God. We can venture to say what God isn't, but God's positive attributes are unthinkable. The next step should have been a rejection of God completely. But even from a self-declared non-theistic mystic acknowledges that this is impossible for Jews. He does, however, recognize that because Judaism has not been primarily concerned with beliefs per se, one who does not believe in God can still come very close to living a life that is fully Jewish in spirit. So I wish that we had hours to talk about this. I do, those of you who didn't hear me give this sermon on belief in God, um, I do suggest you listen to it. I don't know that you will necessarily enjoy the sermon, though I hope you do. But the ideas that I bring up are these ideas about what you said, Larry, belief in God or belief of God, which I think are actually two very different ideas. But what I want to offer to all of you before we go into Mariv is that I want us to know as Jews that it's okay to question our belief in God. And I believe that the reason that it is okay to question our belief in God is because God says right here in our Torah that God is not sure that God's people believe in him or her. And so from the get-go, the deity that we as people are supposed to believe in is already questioning that belief, that trust, that relationship. But the only reason that the Torah would bring it up is because the Torah knew that this would be an ongoing question based on those experiences that we have in life, based on those moments that we come across that are miraculous, or based on those moments that we come across that are devastating to our souls. So God asks this question of, look at all these things that I did for you, and yet, how can you not have faith in me? And as Larry said, that faith doesn't just mean you believe, but that you trust, that you can find relationship with, that you can find responsibility in talking to, whatever it is. And that's going to change. And this was the answer that I gave to my conversion student. It's okay to be on a path where that answer is constantly changing, because from the beginning, there have been different stages of how we connected with God. And so too, in our own lives, we should have the opportunity and the availability to have that connection constantly changing. Yes, Diane, you get the final word.
I was just going to suggest that maybe you want to do a series of classes or discussion groups or something over Zoom. This would be a great topic.
I would be happy. Let's you and I talk about what that would look like, because I would be happy to do so, and would love some ideas of how to do that. It'd be great.
Okay.
Baruch to you, all of you. We are now going to begin with Mariv. Havdalah is in 2 minutes, so we're going to go over a little bit, but zoom into Shabbat, zoom out. Hello. Zoom out of Shabbat doesn't start for another 7 minutes. So those of you who are looking to go there, I will hopefully be getting you there on time. We are not going to do Baruch Hu since we are still alone in our own home. So we are going to start on page 264, page 281 in the Slim Shalom, or page 200 in the full volume Sim Shalom. And we're going to read the first line and then go straight to the bracha after the Baruch Hu. והוא רחום יכפר עוון ולא ישחית, והרבה להשיב אפו ולרכוך חמתו, אדוני הושיע המלך יעננו ויום קוראנו, ברוך אתה אדוני למלך העולם אשר בדברו אמרים וחוכמה בטח שערים ובשביל המשנה. ומעביר יום ומביא לנו מבדיל בין יום ובין לילה, אדוני צבאות שמו, אלך וקיים תמידים לך עלינו לעולם ועד, ברוך אתה אדוני המעריב ערבים, אהבת עולם בית ישראל עמך אהבת מצוות חוקים ומשפטים אתה למדת. ואהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים, ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל, אל מלך נאמן, שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד. ואהבת אדוני אלוהיך. למען תזכרו ועשיתם כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים אליכם, אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם אלוהים, אני אדוני אלוהיכם אמת, ומן הכל זה קיים עלינו כאילו. ומלכותו ברצון קיבלו עליהם משה בני ישראל לכנו שירה בשמחה רבה ואמרו כולם מי כמוך בעלים אדוני מי כמוך נדר בקודש נורתילות עושה פלא מלכותך ראו בניך בוקר היום לפני משה זה אלי אנו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד ונאמר כיפת אדוני תעקב וגולה מיד חזק ממנו ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל השכיבנו אדוני שלום ועמדנו וחנו ושמור צאתנו ובואנו לחיים ושלום יתה ועד עולם. ברוך אתה אדוני שומר עמו ישראל לעד. We are going to move now to the silent, the whispered Amidah for Mariv, page 270, page 286, or page 210. If you have not yet completed your Amidah, please continue at your own pace. We are going to turn now. Again, I don't have all of the pages in front of me for each and every page, but this is right after Chatzikash. It starts Vehi Noam, and we will be reading that right before Aleinu. Vehi Noam, Adonai Aleinu, Aleinu Maseh Yedenu, Kunana Aleinu, Maseh Yedenu, Kunana. Yikra'eni v'neu imolachim b'tzarach al-tzeyu v'yachabadehu orchem asbiyu v'yirei b'shuati orchem asbiyu v'arehu b'shuati. Aleinu, page 281, page 297, or page 696. Aleinu l'shabeach l'Adonai kol tefkenu yitzer b'shishos. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא אדוני אחד ושמו אחד. Alan Wax, would you like to lead us in Kaddish? Are you there?
Sorry.
No, not at all.
Yeah. Okay. Yikadal, Yikada, Shemay Rabbah.
Amen.
Be'alma, Tibrach, Yitzay, Yamif, Rafitay. If I kill you, Yamathon, if I eat the whole bitch Israel, if I go out of man, Amen.
Amen.
Yehi
Yehi
Shmei
Shmei
Rabba
Rabba
Mevarach,
Mevarach Leolam Amay Amaya.
Yitbarach, Bishtabach, Bifa'arav, Yiramav, Yinatzeh, Bifadar, Bitalah, Bitalah, Shmei Kusha, Rishi.
Richu.
Leilon, Nikolder, Kata, Bishirata, Tushkata, Benakmata, Damiram, Dalmad, and Merle, Amen.
Amen.
Yehesh, Lamer, Adam, Shemai, Ayin, Alin, Dalkois, and Merle, Amen.
Amen.
Session, Dalmad, Kuya, Session, Alin, Dalkois, and Merle, Amen.
Amen. I'm going to light this candle and then go and turn off my own light, and I will start the nigun as I walk. Yanai nanai nai nai, yanai nanai nai yanai, yanai nanai nai nai, yanai nanai nai 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 nai, yaina nai 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 nai, yaina nai nai yaina yana nai, yaina nai yana nai nai, yaina nai 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 nai. הנה אל ישועתי, אפתח ולא אפחד, כי עוזי וזמרתיה, אדוני ויהי לי לישועה, ושפטי מים בששון, ממעייני הישועה. לאדוני הישועה, על עמך ברכתך סלע, אדוני צבאות עמנו, משגב לנו, אלוהי יעקב סלע, אדוני צבאות, אשרי אדם בוטח בך, אדוני הושיע, המלך יעננו ויום קורנו ליהודים. הייתה אורה ושמחה וששון ויקר, כן תהיה לנו כוס ישועות אשא, ובשם אדוני אקרא, יין עיני יין עיני עיני, יין עיני יין עיני עיני. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, בורא פרי הגפן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, בורא מיני ושמים. Nothing like a good cinnamon stick. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei meorei ha'esh. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamavdil ben kodesh lechol, ben or lechoshech, ben Yisrael le'amim, בין יום השביעי לששת ימי המעשה, ברוך אתה אדוני, המבדיל בין קודש לחול. המבדיל בין קודש לחול, חטאותינו ימחול, זרענו וכספנו ירבה ירבה כחול, והכוכבים בלילה. זרענו וכספנו ירבה ירבה כחול, וככוכבים בלילה. שבוע טוב, 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 שבוע טוב. אליהו הנביא, אליהו התשבי, אליהו, אליהו, אליהו הגלעדי. במהרה בימינו יבוא אלינו, עם משיח בן דוד, עם משיח בן דוד. Shavua Tov, everyone. It's so nice to see you all. I'm going to jump over to the Zoom out of Shabbat, so I'm going to that's my smoke alarm. So I'm going to close this out, and I will go take care of the smoke alarm and see y'all later. Shavua Tov.
Hindsight, Benji.
Shavua Tov.
Yeah.